I was standing at this bar after work. Nothing fancy. Just one of those places where everyone orders without really looking at the menu. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because I had told myself earlier that day I'd keep things light. Maybe one drink, maybe just some fries. Nothing serious. And then the first round came and I didn't even think about it. I just said yes. Same drink as everyone else. Same size. Same pace. I didn't check the price. Not because I didn't care about money, but because checking felt weird. Like it would slow things down. Like it would signal something about me I didn't want to explain. So I stayed smooth. I stayed agreeable. And the thing that stuck with me later wasn't the taste of the drink or the conversation. It was the feeling that I hadn't really decided anything. I had paid, but I hadn't chosen. And at the time I told myself that was fine. It was just being easy to be around. That felt like a good enough reason. I used to do this thing where I'd quietly upgrade whatever I ordered if the rest of the group did. Nothing dramatic. If everyone got cocktails, I didn't get a beer. If people shared an appetizer, I didn't say I was fine without it. It was always just a few dollars more. 5 here, 8 there. I remember thinking that this was what adults did. You didn't nickel and dime your own social life. You didn't pause the moment over a menu price. So I told myself it wasn't really spending. It was just participating. And for a long time, that story worked. I didn't feel reckless. I didn't feel irresponsible. I felt normal. But every once in a while, usually later at night, I'd replay the receipt in my head and feel this low-grade discomfort I couldn't quite name. Not panic, not regret. Just this sense that I was always paying a little extra to stay in sync. And I never asked how often that was happening. I think part of me didn't want to know. There was this other habit I didn't even clock as spending for a long time. And it showed up every time the check hit the table. Someone would say, "Let's just split it." And everyone would nod like that was the most reasonable idea in the world. And usually it was, except I'd notice sometimes a little too late that I'd ordered less. 1 drink instead of 2, no entree, just something small. And it didn't matter. I paid the same as everyone else. I told myself it evened out over time. I told myself it wasn't worth the math. What I didn't say out loud was that I didn't want to be the guy who complicated things. So I paid for simplicity. I paid to keep the rhythm going. And the strange part is, I felt almost proud of it. Like I was being generous. Only later did it hit me that generosity is usually a choice. And this felt more like avoidance with a receipt attached. Getting there and getting home turned into its own quiet expense. Someone would open an app and say a car was already on the way, and that was that. Walking felt inconvenient. Waiting felt cheap in the wrong way. Public transit felt like a suggestion no one actually meant. So I'd climb into the back seat and watch the number tick up while we talked about work or whatever show everyone was watching. I remember one night when the ride cost almost as much as my food. I laughed about it. I said something like, "Worth it." And maybe it was, in the moment. But later, lying in bed, I felt this weird friction. Not enough to change anything, just enough to notice. I realized I almost never asked myself what I preferred. I asked what kept things moving. And moving smoothly has a price that doesn't show up until you stop. Over time, those outings stopped feeling like events and started feeling like fixtures. Tuesday drinks, Friday dinners, the same names in the group chat, the same places. I didn't question them because questioning felt like pulling a thread you weren't supposed to touch. If I skipped one, someone would ask if everything was okay. And nothing was wrong exactly. I just felt this quiet pressure to keep up, to be present, to be consistent. Even in months where money felt tight, I showed up. I told myself it was about friendship, about maintaining connections. And it was, partly. But there was also this unspoken cost to disappearing. So I didn't. I kept spending in predictable ways, and the predictability made it easier not to look too closely at the total. The night never ended when I thought it would. Someone would suggest another round or dessert or just hanging out a little longer, and I'd feel this brief internal pause, like a speed bump, and then it would pass. Of course. Why not? It was always framed as one more small thing, and small things are easy to say yes to. I noticed that I was rarely the one suggesting these extensions, but I was almost never the one declining them either. The next morning I'd feel fine, maybe a little tired. The money part stayed fuzzy. I'd remember the number in a vague way, but not enough to feel sharp about it. That fuzziness became familiar, comfortable even. And I didn't realize how dangerous comfortable fuzziness can be. There was also the way I dressed when I went out. Nothing flashy, just a slightly nicer version of myself. A better jacket, shoes I didn't love, but felt appropriate. I told myself it was about confidence, about presentation. And again, no one told me to do this. It just felt expected. Like showing up in the wrong outfit would be its own kind of discomfort. So I spent a little more here and there, not chasing style, just avoiding feeling out of place. What stuck with me later was how neutral these purchases felt. No excitement, no regret, just quiet acceptance. I didn't buy them because I wanted them. I bought them because they smoothed something over. And smoothing things over started to look a lot like a monthly line item. Trips with friends made all of this louder. There were always group decisions about where to stay, when to fly, what was worth it. And I noticed how rarely I pushed back. Even when a cheaper option crossed my mind, I kept it there. I didn't want to be the limiter. I didn't want to be the reason plans got smaller. So I nodded along, booked the flight, split the place. I remember putting part of one trip on a credit card and telling myself I'd deal with it later. That later version of me felt abstract, distant, like someone else entirely. In the moment, the priority was harmony. The bill could wait. And it did, just not quietly. Even tipping changed when I was with other people. If someone tossed in extra, I matched it. If the group leaned generous, I leaned with it. I told myself it was about being decent. And it was, but it was also about not standing out. I never asked what I actually felt comfortable giving. I looked around and adjusted. These were small amounts, a few dollars, but they added up in the same invisible way everything else did. I didn't feel taken advantage of. I felt aligned. And alignment, it turns out, has a cost structure all its own. At some point, I did the math. Not on purpose. It just kind of happened. I realized that if I was spending an extra $20 or $25 a couple times a week just by going along, that was over $2,000 a year. Probably closer to $3,000. Saying it out loud made my stomach tighten a little. Not because it was devastating, but because it was believable. It fit. It explained why things always felt tighter than they should have. I hadn't been careless. I'd been comfortable. And comfort, spread out over time, had quietly become expensive. Birthdays and celebrations layered on top of all of this. Group gifts, dinners for someone else. Another reason the spending felt justified. You can't opt out of those without feeling like you're opting out of the group itself. So I didn't. I celebrated. I contributed. And there were months where it felt like every weekend came with a reason to spend. I didn't feel angry about it, just tired, like I was constantly reaching into the same pocket for different occasions. Whenever it started to feel heavy, I'd tell myself I'd pull back next month. That this was just a busy stretch, a social season. And next month always arrived with the same invitations, the same expectations, the same easy yeses. I wasn't lying to myself exactly. I just kept postponing the moment where I'd have to look at it directly. That was the part I didn't want to look at first. The idea that this wasn't temporary. It was a pattern. Money never really came up in these groups. Not in a real way. We talked about jobs and raises and costs in general terms, but not about limits, not about trade-offs. I assumed everyone else was doing fine, or at least better than me. Looking back, I realized that was probably a shared illusion. Everyone quietly adjusting, quietly stretching, quietly paying to stay comfortable together. Credit card rewards made it easier to ignore. Points, cashback, little digital pats on the head for spending more. I told myself I was being smart, optimizing, but the rewards never covered the difference. They just softened it, made it feel less real. And I let that softness carry me longer than it should have. What surprised me most was how emotionally draining it became. Not in a dramatic way, just this low-level weariness. Like I was always slightly behind, even when things were good. I didn't connect that feeling to money at first. It just felt like adulthood. Later, I realized how much energy it takes to constantly smooth things over. I also noticed how much comparison played into it. Seeing what others ordered, where they stayed, how casually they spent. I filled in gaps with assumptions. I assumed ease meant affordability. I never really knew. I just matched the surface. There were moments I almost spoke up. Almost said I was going to skip this one. Almost suggested something cheaper. And every time, the moment passed. Not because I couldn't speak, but because it felt unnecessary. And unnecessary things are easy to drop. The comfort became invisible. That was the trick. Nothing ever felt like a big decision, just a series of small ones that didn't feel like decisions at all. And when I finally noticed, it wasn't because something broke. It was because I felt worn down in a way I couldn't explain. I started to wonder where the line was between belonging and buying peace, between enjoying people and financing the feeling. I didn't have a clean answer. I still don't. I just know they're not the same thing, even when they look similar from the outside. Sometimes I come home now and look at a receipt from a night out. The numbers aren't shocking, they're familiar. And that's what makes me pause. I set it down on the counter and stand there for a second longer than I used to, not judging it, just noticing it. And noticing how often I paid to stay comfortable, without ever calling it that.